Good evening, everybody. And it looks like we have our online audience joining us. So hi, everybody. We're just chatting and getting ready. Welcome to our online audience and to our in-person audience. I'm Stesha Brandon, the Literature and Humanities Program Manager here at the Seattle Public Library. As we begin tonight, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. These are the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people. We honor their elders past and present and thank them for their stewardship of this land. Welcome to tonight's program with Pamela Sneed and Shin Yu Pai, presented in partnership with the AMP AIDS Memorial Pathway, Seattle's LGBTQ+ Center, formerly Gay City, POCAN, People of Color Against AIDS Network, and the Lavender Rights Project. We're grateful to our author series sponsor, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, and the Seattle Times for their generous support of library programs. Thank you as well to the Seattle Public Library Foundation. Private gifts to the foundation from thousands of donors help the library provide free programs and services that touch the lives of everyone in our community. Hello, hello, hello. I've said hello 14 times, but welcome to our online attendees and our in-person attendees. I have just a couple announcements before we get started. If you're here with us in person tonight, Elliott Bay Books have copies of Pamela's book at the table to your right. And if you are watching online, you can find Pamela's books at Elliott Bay's website, elliottbaybook.com. And I'll be posting links to Pamela's books and other fun links to all of our partners throughout the course of the event. So you can also look in the chat in just a minute. I also wanted to let folks know that we have closed captioning available. You may have noticed that we have closed captioning if you're here in the audience. This is a new program for us, so let us know how it goes. And if you would prefer to access the closed captioning on your own device, I have QR codes where you can scan it with your phone and look at it on your phone if that's less awkward, than looking at the screen. For folks watching online, if you want to access the closed captioning, you just need to go to the bottom of your Zoom screen and to the closed captioning icon and click that on, and you'll be able to see the closed captions. I also wanted to let you know for folks here in person, if you need to exit the auditorium during the event, there's a door to your right. As you can tell, the building is officially closed and that door became a wall, so that's a little freaky. So if you need to leave, you can just go out there, and if you need to use the restrooms, they're open, and you would just go through the lobby that way and then down the hall there. That's my stewardess or air host sort of thing. After tonight's conversation, there's going to be time for questions from the audience as well. And I think, did we decide we're going to do sort of informal and then repeat? Yeah, so Shin will call on folks and then we'll repeat the question for the online audience. So we're going to keep it casual tonight. And then if you're watching online, you can write your questions at any time during the course of the program in the Q&A box, and then we'll make sure to integrate those into the Q&A portion of the program. And finally, we're interested in hearing from you. So toward the close of the program, I'll be posting a link to the survey in the chat for folks watching online, and then folks at home can return the paper surveys that you received as you're heading out for the evening. Now I am delighted to welcome Kai Horton and Sam Choi from Seattle's LGBTQ+ Center, who will speak a little bit more about their work and the AIDS Memorial Pathway Project. Welcome.
Greetings, folks. Can you, oh yeah, that sounds nice. Good evening. How's it going? Awesome. Hi, my name's Kai Horton. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. Hello to the online folks. I don't know where you are in the ether, but hello. I'm the co-executive director at Seattle's LGBTQ+ Center, and I'm joined by a dear one.
Hi, my name is Sam Choi. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator at Seattle's LGBTQ+ Center. Yeah.
And it's a great honor to just share a little bit about our work and talk a little bit about the AIDS Memorial Pathway. Our center was formerly known as Gay City, and 27 years ago, we were part of a really important movement towards ending the HIV AIDS stigma and epidemic, and we're still doing that work today. Our wellness center freely offered HIV and STI testing to the community, and we are joined by really amazing folks like POCAN and Entre Hermanos and other folks who are doing this work too alongside us. We have a youth advocacy team that works a lot with ending the stigma as well for young people and getting them the support that they need from the beginning. And so that way they can grow up in a world that is a little bit more aware of how to hold them as queer and trans folks. And so it feels really important to talk a little bit about the AMP, or the AIDS Memorial Pathway, and just to give some credit where credit is due. The pathway uses public art to create a physical place for remembrance and reflection. And it shares stories about the epidemic and the diverse community responses to the crisis, and provides a call to action to end HIV, AIDS, stigma, and discrimination. It feels really important to honor Pamela tonight, because we know that often femmes and lesbians, especially femmes and lesbians of color, were not uplifted in the same way that cis white men were in the beginning of this epidemic and even today. And so we feel really honored that we get to share space with you tonight, Pamela, and as well as our friends over at POCAN and Lavender Rights Project, and everyone else that's been involved in this project for, wow, since 2015. So yes, thank you to everyone, and thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Kai and Sam. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Shin Yu Pai, the library's public engagement guest curator. Shin Yu Pai is former program director of Town Hall Seattle and curated and produced events for Atlas Obscura while leading public programs for Atlas Obscura Society in Seattle for 5 years. She's the author of 11 books of poetry and a 2022 Artist Trust Fellow. She's the host and creator of The Blue Suit, a podcast on Asian American stories produced by KUOW Public Radio, Seattle's NPR affiliate. Shin Yi is also putting together some wonderful programs for the library this fall, including an upcoming event with Sean Sherman, the chef that created the sous chef, and that will be on November 4th, little plug, and then Jenny Liu on December 7th. But first, here to tell us a little bit more about Pamela, please help me welcome Shin Yu Pai.
Thank you so much, Stesha and Seattle Public Library, for hosting this event. Pamela Sneed is a New York-based poet, performer, and visual artist. She is the author of Imagine Being More Afraid of Freedom Than Slavery, Kong and Other Works, Sweet Dreams, and Funeral Diva, which was published by City Lights in October 2020. Funeral Diva won the 2021 Lambda Lesbian Poetry Award. In 2021, Pamela was a finalist for New York Theater Workshop's Golden Harris Award. And as a popular presenter, she has shared her work at Yale University, Georgetown University, Bard Center for Humanities, the Ford Foundation, New York Public Library, Brooklyn Museum, MoMA, DIA, and NYU Center for Humanities. Pamela's writing has appeared in Paris Review, Frieze Magazine, Art Forum, the Academy of American Poets, and more. Her visual work was featured in the group show Omniscient at Leslie Lohman Museum. And Pamela has also participated as a reader in the 2022 Whitney Biennial and is a narrator for Coco Fusco's film, which is also in the Whitney Biennial. She is a professor in the School of the Art Institute of Chicago's low residency MFA program, where she has been a guest artist for 6 consecutive years. She also teaches poetry and art across disciplines at Columbia. The New York Times praised Funeral Diva for its abundance, its desire for language to stir body as well as mind. Bringing light to unacknowledged and forgotten activists and caregivers of the AIDS epidemic, Pamela celebrates and remembers the contributions and leadership of Black lesbians in her book. Please welcome Pamela Sneed.
Hey, everybody. All right, thank you. Thank you, Shin Yu. Thank you to the library. Thank you for everybody who's invited me here. And I'm gonna try to take it easy. My longtime friend, Sammy, is here. Sammy Formo, yay. Yeah, we've known each other like 30, 40 years. Okay, I don't want to give it away. I'm going to start off with some new work, and then I'm going to work my way into Funeral Diva. Yeah. The morning of 9/11, a friend called at 8:30 a.m., asked me to turn on the TV. I saw the burnt umber flames, black smoke billowing from the Twin Towers, and stared in disbelief. I walked to work downtown Brooklyn, saw a parade of people in zombie-like state, covered in blood and soot. There are moments in life you remember the exact time and place where you were, what the weather was like, who you were talking to or not, because the occasion is that important or disastrous. Like moments when a celebrity or a politician dies. For my father's generation, it may have been when Kennedy or Martin Luther King got shot. My father, an atheist and apolitical, but an acute watcher, I imagine he sighed deep, shook his head. His arm rested on the low partition that separated the kitchen and living room in our apartment. Even if he never voted or cared for the political process, loved white women, a few years ago, watching a political debate between Hillary Clinton and Trump, my father remarked to me, "The lies. Those are very rich people." And even though my father was far outside the political process, he knew King did not deserve to die like that, shot dead on a balcony, the Prince of Peace. In the early 90s, poet Sekou Sandiata stood in front of a classroom at the New School and described the day that Kennedy was shot, how tiny bits of John's brain blew all over Jackie's pink skirt. Today is that day for me. The weather is fall. The time is around 2:43. I'm sitting in bed with a maroon comforter, gray skies. I've been battling a bad cold for weeks. I'm talking to my cousin, and confirming this is the day, the hour, the moment I will stop speaking to my mother. I saw somewhere on Instagram, fall trees teach us how beautiful and important it is to let go. The bare, naked leaves are not ashamed. I never wanted this, but I decided I can already breathe better. There's a sense of relief after realizing I can no longer sustain the relationship. I want to remember this day, though tragic, as the day when I chose my freedom. Described as an honor killing in Iraq, a heterosexual man traveled from abroad and killed his sister, a transgender woman. Police knew she was in danger. Instead of protection, told her to hide, move far away. Friends said she was full of light, wouldn't hurt a soul, was a hairdresser. The perpetrator, her brother, was not arrested, fled by car to a neighboring country. In the same country, another woman weeps, saying that her husband and son have murdered the transgender child she birthed in an honor killing. All over the world, there are burns and scars of women disfigured beyond recognition by some flimsily constructed porous excuse called protecting the family honor. I want to, but can't separate what occurred at the Academy Awards in the United States. A Black man slaps another, claiming to have dishonored another's wife. At the end of that argument, I see violence and death, male egos. If this were medieval times, perhaps a duel was in order. But in 2022, all I can do is cry, question. My friend says the slap was indicative of our moment, almost maybe post-pandemic, an upside down world caused by sickness and death, endless quarantines, inflation, senseless violence abounds. I won't even mention my music teacher, murdered in an act that I will never be able to make sense of. Heart hardens, I keep going, afraid to stop. If one is fortunate, some may receive a gift, a talent, lever to pull in cases of emergency, like the black box found in planes with instructions on how to survive. Someone that serves as a preserver, a raft in floodwaters. As many of you know, my lifeline has always been poetry. From the time I was 8 years old, I heard an infomercial for poetry by Maya Angelou and Still I Rise. It opened up the windows, made me know what is possible, which is why I can't disparage anything about Maya Angelou as some do, because she saved me. I always wanted to write a children's book, a story about a hero called poetry, that in dire times we can speak and create her. As an aside, I often wonder about America's fascination with superheroes. Perhaps it's an alter ego, Jekyll and Hyde, that a country on the regular that commits atrocities could have its heart in children's stories and superheroes, a sign that it never grew up. And just so you know, I was offended by Black Panther being categorized as a drama at the Academy Awards, and the decision to re-release it in theaters during Black History Month so that all Black children could see it. Just imagine if white history was shown once a year instead of year round. How would they feel if the movie about them was The Incredibles? I'm just saying. Anyway, it was education that led me out of the suburbs and sure fate for Black women and girls. To Northeastern University, I attended with Wendy Williams. And there again, I discovered through the African American Institute poetry and theater. Still, it was writing and theater that led me to the New School, that led me to my first writing class with Jane Lazar, when I wrote about a girl, a Black girl that caused nothing but shame and pain, a Black girl so ugly that her mother would not accept her, cursed from birth until death, left to wage her own war on the world that cursed her. She knew it was me. She wrote at the bottom of my papers, "Yours is the best poetry and writing I've ever read in all of my years of teaching." Her words gave me, for the first time, gave me a sense of worth and purpose. And after I'd gotten heavily into drugs, one morning in a Lower East Side tenement, strung out, I decided to jump off the roof and kill myself. The only thing that I could think to live for was poetry. I'm saying all of this to say, I've taken the long and scenic route to tell you it was me, not craft, that became my mother's hero. I was a champion from the early age of 9 during my father's beatings when she would instruct me to call the police. Later, when over the holidays he gave her nothing, I stole from department stores to give her presents. And she would taunt my father, saying, "My daughter will give me presents." As an adult, I went there and sometimes stood between my father and she during their arguments. It was her words, "Get an education," that led me out of the suburbs into higher education. I was able to escape her fate. I'm writing this now to say, despite all of my valiant efforts, I can no longer be my mother's hero. All of these years, even though high femme, I always had a sense of bravado that I could save anyone. It showed up always in my teaching with students. Anyone in a dark place, I'd show up in my raft and I'd toss them a preserver. Only now, the enemy is death. I see my mother descending and I cannot pry open the jaws of fate where not even poetry can intervene. If I were to calculate, I figure my father lived 3 to 4 years, maybe even 10 years longer than expected, than was possible. He pushed himself. I suspect it was an urge to protect my mother, perhaps me, knowing she had mental health issues and they'd been together so long, 50 years. When one faltered, the other would ask, "Are you going somewhere?" There was some pact that they'd stay together, but my father knew he was going. In a car parking lot 10 years ago, he told me, "I'm starting to forget things. I have no memory. I haven't told your mother. The doctor gave me drugs, but I won't take them." And every time I visited home after, he started to give me things like pictures of himself as a boy, him with boxing gloves on, him with a cigarette. Once while visiting, he put a couple of plastic cups in my luggage. Yes, those clear plastic cups you get in a dollar store, because he saw me use them to hold water for painting. No one could guess how much a clear dime store plastic cup means to me. He also started to leave me parting messages. "You're a good girl. You never gave me any problems." I suppose it's the way Chicken George and Roots left his son at the crossroads. I knew this summer when I visited and I saw my father drag across the floor to cook me an egg for breakfast that he didn't have much longer to live. When I came home, I told a few friends he was dying, but no one listened. But I knew. So I wasn't at all shocked when I'd gotten the call he'd fallen. I was first to tell my mother, my family in denial. I revealed it slowly when he entered the nursing home and he was curled in the fetal position. He wasn't coming home. Ever. After his death, I started taking things to remember him by. His leather jacket, a bright aqua sweatshirt, his shoes. I even took his old spice sets, deodorants and cufflinks, things fitting for a gay daughter. I even took an onyx and gold ring he wore with his initials centered in gold. I'd admired it all my life, and not until I got home did I see that the onyx was cracked and glued together. Someday with time and money, I'll replace it. That ring seems like a metaphor for many things about my father, that from a distance it shone and it was beautiful, but up close you could see where it was broken. I've been asked to write something political about my father's death. He wasn't George Floyd, Jacob Blake shot to death in front of his kids by the police. He wasn't Walter Scott, shot in the back by police, running away from a routine traffic stop. My father had a penchant for hurting women. He drank. He wasn't any of those Black men heard about in history. He had and he kept a factory job. He retired at 65. He suffered from untreated depression. He went crazy with my mother. The only thing I can say is I was talking to a friend about the recent deaths of famous poet men. The unofficial cause, he told me, was sepsis. How does one get sepsis while under the care of doctors, he asked. Then I think of seeing my father's death certificate. One of the unofficial causes was sepsis. I was angry when I saw it with no one to tell. And I think of how fast the nursing home shipped my father back to the hospital on the same day that the money for Medicare stopped. It's too tiring to fight, but still, I have questions. Whew, thanks. Whew, all right, yeah. After reading, a guy came up to me and he said, "I really like that next day poem you read." And what are you talking about? I asked, bewildered. I don't have a next day poem. He was like, when you said if the Capitol rioters were Black, there would have been no next day. Oh, I said, realizing he had summarized as opposed to quoting exactly what I said, but essentially, yes. If the Capitol rioters were Black, we all know that there would have been no next day. The police made a big deal arresting the white rioters days, weeks after, but we know if the rioters were Black, they wouldn't have left Washington alive if any escaped. Washington would have been secured like a fortress in a war or a medieval film. Sky turned black with helicopters like vultures circling overhead. All over the news, there'd be talk of a manhunt, as they love to say. Police and FBI would have known exactly who and what number of people entered the building. They would have enacted something like COINTELPRO, long before like what was done to the Panthers, spies sent to infiltrate Proud Boy and Oath Keeper organizations, FBI files on each one, every dirty deed, real or imagined, faces pinned to billboards, trackers on their phones, once arrested, thrown into solitary confinement. Some might have even hung themselves under mysterious circumstances like Biko in South Africa and Sandra Bland in Texas, when we all know they actually weren't suicidal at all. If the Capitol rioters had been Black, we'd have known their names and faces. They'd be plastered all over the news. There have been no requests for organic food awaiting trial, and there would be no next day. I'm going to read one more and go into funeral diva. As little as I tried, I could not bring myself to watch When They See Us about the Central Park Five or Surviving R. Kelly, too many scenes of subjection. So flipping through the streaming services, I settled on a good old-fashioned rom-com called Twilight, between a vampire and a young white woman named Bella. They're teenagers. It's kind of cool. And the music is totally early 90s London, The Cure. And their romance goes on for about 5 movies without breaking up, so that's a feat. And it all works if you suspend belief. I enjoyed it until the race consciousness part of me crept in, asking why are these two guys going on about this pouty white girl for 5 movies? The Native American werewolf guy just kind of tags along. I mean, Kristen Stewart is cool and she's a butch dyke in real life, but why would these men fight over this white woman for eternity? I mean, I think things too, like if you're a vampire, you can get away with stuff like having no boundaries because he pops into Bella's room at every hour of the night, which would be called stalking. My race consciousness interjects itself into every scene I watch. Por ejemplo, I watched A Star is Born, and for the first 10 minutes, I was incredulous. All I could think of was the Black Panther breakthrough, followed up by a box office dominated by a movie about 2 white straight people in love. In the era of unspeakable violence against women, girls, trans people, and people of color, we are made to watch and value 2 white people in love. Imagine, at the height of apartheid in South Africa, Mandela jailed, Biko murdered, and the box office offers white romantic fantasies while people are fighting for their lives. I was just incredulous. But then it picked up and I decided to stay. By the way, I was really offended during Black History Month when they decided to re-release Black Panther in movie theaters free so Black kids could see it. I mean, imagine if the whole of white history were shoved or compacted into 1 month and not the entire year as it exists now, and they decided to re-release Toy Story as a celebration of white culture. Give me a break. All films are race films, like it or not. Like, I rewatched Black Panther innocently, and I kind of enjoyed myself, but the message is your brother, not the FBI, is your enemy. It gives little context of white oppression. It's like discussing the Rwandan massacre, excluding the role that Belgium played in tribal warfare. Anyway, I watched the film Infinity Wars, a superhero farce. The white boys go to battle it out in Wakanda, which is a fictitious Africa. And I was sort of excited to see all the Black characters again. I was also told in Endgame, all of Wakanda is wiped out. But then I was watching a fight scene, and well, Wakanda is supposed to have mega resources like vibranium and technology, but I had to blink my eyes twice because during battle, I was like, wait a minute. Is that a spear? I leaned in close. The Black people were using spears and riding rhinos, like in old Tarzan movies, and the white superheroes were using technology to fight. Go figure. Then I watched Skull Island, curious about how they'd handle King Kong, and even more curious than placing Kong in Africa surrounded by oil-painted natives. This King Kong was god of a Polynesian island. And while he and Samuel Jackson face off in what could be called black on black crime, they mirror each other. Their nostrils flare in exactly the same way when they're angry, and each will kill to protect their own. White responsibility and racism absolved. And just one more thing. Can we talk about Ben Affleck? No diss, because we're all human after all, but I need to know why Hollywood continues to put money behind him. All of his movies, except Good Will Hunting, have flopped. They say Jiggly, made with Jennifer Garner, was down and lost 98 million. Still, they made Ben a superhero Batman. Everything tanked. But it goes to show you how much money goes into Hollywood myth making. A heterosexual white man, Cary Grant, Burt Reynolds, all the money, $98 million could feed. Forest fires put out, animals alive, saved, and free. Thank you. Amen. I'm not sure why, but it's taken forever for me to write this poem. And I hope to remember all the pieces, but I've developed a new condition, one that's come from age. I can no longer take the shit that I once did. And there's a part of my condition that comes from gentrification and cell phone use, living amidst tech zombies and their general fear and hatred of people of color. My condition is called sidewalk rage. It's kind of like road rage, but it comes when I'm walking down the street and there's some millennial who's just moved into the neighborhood who thinks it's theirs, a white girl who in broad daylight feels a dark presence walking behind her. It's me, minding my own business, and she gets so panicked and paralyzed, she stops walking and holds her purse. With my new condition, I yell, if you don't want to live around Black people, get the fuck out of the neighborhood. She's shocked. Or in another scenario, you see random white women on their phone standing in a doorway, completely blocking it because, only they exist. And you're like, hello, hello. Yes, all these years I thought I was still a small town girl, and then suddenly with my sidewalk rage, I'm a bona fide New Yorker, like the ones you've seen on bicycles banging on the hood of a taxi cab that tries to cut them off. My person with sidewalk rage is a character of their own, where once I was silent. Recently, I confronted a man who was blocking my path crossing the street. He had his head down and almost ran into me. I sucked my teeth really loud and I said, move. He was so angry, I confronted him. He yelled, "Son!" I started to yell something profane, but I stopped myself. And then I was in the subway going downstairs and a white man rammed into me on the phone. My sidewalk rage kicked in and I thought for a second to sneak behind him and kick him down the stairs. That's my sidewalk rage, but I stopped myself. I don't know who this person is in me, who would never speak up for herself, was always soft and vulnerable, who's been at various times pickpocketed, blasphemed, body slammed, ransacked, ridiculed, who now has a voice, who now lets rage show, who couldn't express herself, has become all angles and sharp edges. I may attach this to another poem, and I may not. This may stand on its own, but these are my jokes. If you happen to go outside and you see some lady, some bitch on the street, 50-ish, coat open, it's under 20 degrees, don't yell, are you fucking crazy? Leave her alone. She's in menopause, 0 degrees, hot flush, and that shit feels good. Also, if you're on a bus or a train and you really need to sit down, find a Black man, a big Black man. Next to him, the seat is always empty. Next to big Black women too. Sometimes on a crowded bus to Boston, the seat next to me is completely empty. And just so you know, I'm in a rage about crudité. Fuck crudité. I mean, who eats crudité except for starving first-year college students at a book party? Really, what middle-aged person do you know is going to chew hard on a carrot stick at a party? It's not a barn, a sheep or some shit. I mean, what about sensitivity to people with fake ass teeth? I mean, I looked over recently at an event and I saw some Brussels sprouts on a platter of crudité at a party. Raw ass, hard ass Brussels sprouts. No one is going to eat raw Brussels sprouts at a party. And to my point, no one touched them. And just so you know, politics has ruined my ability to enjoy Christmas or escape. I love Christmas. I watched Frosty the Snowman with my mother over the holiday, but then politics came in. I started questioning if the relationship between Frosty and the little girl who loved him was age appropriate. I mean, why do they hug so fucking much? I know he's supposed to be snow, but just why was he so fucking white? I mean, it's like hundreds of years of patriarchy you can't get out from under. My new accountant has tons of jokes. He's a Black man. He said, the revolution is coming. And to those who say that they don't serve Blacks, it's okay because we don't eat them. Anyway, today, to be honest, I feel like Patsy in 12 Years a Slave. Beaten for picking cotton. I mean, I like somebody who is white, their partner is white, they have stocks, trust funds, and a retirement plan, and I feel like fucking Patsy in 12 Years a Slave, alternately known as Mammy. Size, color, class. I was never allowed to be little. By little, I mean innocent. By little, I mean allowed to play, make mistakes. If anything occurred in whatever setting, I was always blamed. I was mistaken constantly for being older than I was. At 6, when my stepmother came, she refused to allow me alone time with my father. If a moment occurred, she asked, "What were you doing with him?" As if at 6, I were molesting my father. I was once caught through an open bathrobe trying to see my father's penis. My stepmother never forgot. "You were trying to look at him," she said. I was not given toys, books, anything, stuffed animals, bows, ribbons, anything that may be attached to a little girl. I was also my mother's sounding board for her adult problems with my dad, constantly instructed to call the police when he hit her. The only thing that my parents could figure out to do together for some small infraction was to give me punishment, 2 weeks. So I never knew the nurturance that girls got. My adult life has duplicated this, always to blame, outside, refusing to see my little girl. On occasion, my mother sent me to the store to get candy, things that she liked: Fireballs, Reese's peanut butter cups, Kit Kat bars, black licorice, sometimes red, which I liked, Twizzlers. I remember once chewing a pack of red Twizzlers as an adult. The red stem hung out of my mouth. A friend at the time exclaimed, "Oh my God, Pamela, you're such a little girl." Once when I was with a woman, someone looked on and said, "Oh my God, your little girl is out." In relationships too, I was never the little girl. In fact, in most of them, I rescued radically immature women. I was their mother, their caretaker, the one with all the responsibility. And of course, when it ended, I was always to blame. Everything to me lies around class, race, gender lines, even in so-called evolved communities, even with POC. I always know no one would treat a white-skinned woman or a man in ways that I've been treated. In colleges where I teach, I'm always aware of the hierarchy, people screaming about diversity. I moan, complain how the AIDS narrative only belongs to men. They never ask women, Black women, as if AIDS didn't happen to us, our fathers, brothers, sons, nephews, cousins, acquaintances. The Black gay boys in the choir became disappeared. I remember a pair of Black gay men who were spiritual would act as ministers and bury the dead Black boys families wouldn't recognize. These men showed up as the priests and gave last rites. And what of the women, a mother nursing a grown son returned to a baby ravaged by AIDS? Me being young myself, going into sick wards like leper colonies, seeing those abandoned by society, I never forgot. Even my era did not allow me to be little, innocent, a threat if I spoke up, a competitor for middle-class white girls who had the world handed to them and resented me, you, for surviving, thriving against all odds. How are we doing for time? Yeah. Say again. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. All right. On the Orlando shooting, let's be clear. It wasn't ISIS or Islam that licensed that man to walk into a gay bar and massacre those white and gay people of color. It was America with her heinous gun laws that allow any white or white-skinned man with mental health problems to purchase weapons of war, machine guns with minimal background check. Meanwhile, Black and brown people can't walk through a neighborhood to buy candy, survive a routine traffic stop without being murdered. No, he wasn't trained in hills of Afghanistan. He didn't learn bomb-making techniques from the Taliban. It was here in America he learned with her apartheid policies, separate and unequal, separate schools, separate bathrooms, separate, that bred a rampant, repressed homophobe. It was from demagogues like Trump that purport building walls and keeping people out and inciting fear, fear, fear. It was America and the Bush Clan that proved you could lie and kill and get away with it, that certain populations were disposable. I've seen these massacres before. It was when Black and brown queers were dying rapidly of AIDS. Only then the guns were indifference. Guns were in the hands of every American. Guns were in the hands of politicians, of doctors, in a system that hated queers. I've seen it before, this killing and the zigzag scars of women poets who died of breast cancer in institutions that still claim their legacy. Like many, I've searched the hallways for justice. I paced up and down. I begged to be heard, asked for simple treatment for simple problems, gaslighted, bankrupted, run around, only to find out in America, women's wombs are big business. I've seen this killing before. It happens every day. Reality shows teaching us to step on and crush each other to get ahead. A television that shows someone actually slicing Gaddafi's jugular. I've left so many places, so many communities because of safety concerns. Sekou Sundiata died in the emergency room from a heart attack. Willie Ninja, that beautiful, beautiful, beautiful dancer, went blind. I could go on, but my brother Essex Hempel is calling to me, telling me, as he did in the crisis so long ago, telling us to wrap our arms around each other and hold tight. Hold tight. Hold tight. Jam. I used to always write about a Soto saint, slamming his hand down on the pulpit at Donald Wood's funeral when it was common to hide the cause of death of young men who died from AIDS if they were buried at all and weren't abandoned. Somebody told me about a thin boy, thin with fear and death, played the piano for the choir. No one touched him or talked about it. I know in my mother's family, her mother's sister said a parasite had killed her son when he died suddenly. But I remember him once coming out of a gay bar in Boston, and all the white boys said, "How do you know her?" And I don't know if it was he or me who said, "I'm his cousin, I'm his cousin." He made me promise not to tell anyone in the family I'd seen him there. So when they said parasite, I knew something didn't ring true. His mother, a seemingly healthy woman, died shortly after that, but I always felt their deaths were related. His mother, either from the lies or the repression or a broken heart, having lost her young son. And I know everyone blames Jussie Smollett for his lies and staged attack, but it makes me think that there was something very toxic going on, that he didn't feel he could talk to someone, either that or he was covering up an addiction or a hookup. Watching a Soto saint stand up at Donald's funeral and tell the truth goes down in history as one of the bravest moments I've ever witnessed. Either that or Audre Lorde spreading open the arms of her dashiki, the bravest woman that we have all witnessed, telling a crowded room of followers, "I began on this journey as a coward." That, or seeing a friend at the height of the AIDS era at a bar, his face covered in purple welts, refusing to hide, going out in public. That, or Donald Woods being feeble, barely able to walk, accepting an award as director of AIDS films, or an ex-lover on a beach taking off her top and refusing to hide her mastectomy scar. Or when Denitra Vance performed at the public theater and danced naked, revealing her mastectomy scars, and Audrey refusing to wear a prosthesis. Or when Zakes Mokai and Master Harold and the Boys in the first Broadway play that a cousin took me to said to his white master, "Have you ever seen a black man's ass?" And he pulled down his pants and he revealed himself to the audience. I was 16 years old. Or that, or seeing my mother beaten religiously and still go out to work as if it hadn't happened at all. Or even me surviving so many incredible tests. And once when I was talking to a doctor, I doubted my strength and he looked at me incredulously and he said, "You are strong." Another doctor, he looked at me, he looked at my suffering and he said, "Isn't anybody there for you?" And another said, "You deserve to be taken care of." But today, once more, I am nursing my broken heart, caused by someone who betrayed, was not honest. That and attending an event and asking white people to give up their seats to Black people who couldn't sit down, and seeing social justice in action. Yes, I often think of Asado Saint for the important place he resides in my history, but today I am examining his tactics. I'm pulling the tools off the shelf. I'm dusting off the weaponry in an exhibit because today I need to use what he taught me. Today, I feel that puff of rage, that continuous assault, and I want to stand up. I want to testify, though too I haven't been asked. I want to interrupt all the proceedings, all the places Black lesbians have been erased and silenced, like looking down at a manuscript and seeing that they asked a young white woman to write about Black queer history when it's been my area of expertise forever. or only attributing 80s and 90s AIDS activism to ACTA. I want the point of outrage now not only to be the historicizing of AIDS, but the fact that women and Black lesbians have been erased from the dialogue when there are so many organizations like GMAD, other countries, Adoti, men of all colors together, Salsa Sol, Las Buenas Amigas, and more. Or asking, where are all the Black lesbians on Pose? Because certainly they were there on the piers and part of that history. And why are white men constantly at the helm to tell our stories? And why don't white queers recognize that? And seeing panel after panel being organized on history and art and all things important to the world, and no one thinking or noticing it might be important to have a Black lesbian present, just like they kicked Stormé out of the Stonewall narrative. And what about the people who weren't on the streets, but in jobs? Fighting the system, the dykes and the queers meeting each other, forming community and connections and family and love, just like in South Africa when they prevented intermingling, but ways were found. And each time we touched and we loved and we found each other in darkness and in light, it was resistance. Every time we told each other, you're beautiful, you are not wrong. It was resistance when we stood up to the parents and the families and the courts and those that shunned us. It was resistance when we wore what we really wanted to wear. It was resistance when we yelled at the doctors and the drug professionals. It was resistance. And every time we wrote and we read poems, it was resistance. And every time some queer kid stays alive because they saw us, they read us, discovered the archive, we've won. Every war is fought on our. And one day, after the gender, racial, sexual orientation wars are over in America, there will be a new generation, just like in South Africa, called the born. And I'm going to read one more. The headline in yesterday's news blared a tale of two pandemics, shocking inequities in the healthcare system. What got me was the use of the word shocking and two. Those of us who lived through the 1980s, early 90s AIDS crisis already knew about the existence of two New Yorks, two 20, 30, 40, 50 Americas, maybe more, depending on age, race, class, citizenship, status, entirely different systems for those who aren't white, straight, middle class. Those of us who saw our brothers, sisters, friends die at the hands of a system that shunned, refused to treat, threw away the unwanted, still can't forget a gay friend. Waiting for Medicaid to treat HIV. He got sicker and sicker. I asked why Medicaid took so long. He said, they're waiting to see if I die first. That wasn't the America that I learned about in elementary school. I was instructed to put my hand over my heart and salute. That wasn't the free America that we sang of. People who are LGBTQIA already know that there are two Americas. A doctor who kept forcing me to take a pregnancy test, even after I insisted at the time I only have sex with women. Still a test. I saw his scorn. He made me pay for. And all those women who were forcibly sterilized, had wombs, their life force taken, left dry, barren by doctors who never even stopped to explain, felt entitled to take, scar women's bodies, breasts cut off, no options or consolation given. Women who aren't rich and white already know invisible lines you can't cross with no insurance or Medicaid, forced into black markets for drugs, a land of botched care, botched procedures. Black people already know separate doors, separate entrances, treatments, options existing long after Jim Crow. And I have kept waiting for this moment. This time of a medical Me Too, when those who suffered from botched procedures and the indignity step from the shadows, speak and name the atrocities committed, medical malpractice. I won't blame all doctors. Some are good, just middlemen like so many in a broken system. doing what they can. And I'm grateful for the good ones in this pandemic, risking their own lives. But the image of medical research that we see in movies and on television who understand the complex problems, forcing medical books and science journals stay up all night burning the midnight oil to find a cure whose eyes deep with concern are mostly false. Rare like the ones who find cures and refuse to patent or personally profit, those days have become a myth. What replace them are businessmen wanting status amongst peers, entry to country clubs and power, gaslighters, hustlers like Trump. There is a doctor at Mount Sinai, star of his field, charged with drugging and raping his patients. No one believed it until it was proven. His victims were only one. The rest, you know. Thank you, Seattle. Yeah, right there. Aw, thank you. Thank you, Dad. Thank you. Aw, thank you so much. Woo, yeah. Woo. Thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Should I bring my work? I can leave it here.
Is this working? Yes, it is. Thank you for that wonderful reading. Thank you for that wonderful reading, Pamela. So powerful.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, it's our pleasure to host you. So, your book in your book Funeral Diva, in one of your poems, you write, "Who even cares about what happens to women, Black lesbians, lesbians of color? There's no public outcry." You said that it took 15 years to write the poem Funeral Diva, and it is part of your life's work to document the lives of Black gays and lesbians who've died of AIDS and cancer. The work of grieving, witnessing, and memorializing in the face of constant erasure isn't an easy commitment. Can you talk about the journey towards finding your voice in poetry and how a political sensibility has always been a part of that work?
Well, I wrote this piece. I left it in the hotel, but I wrote it for what is it? I wrote it for Karen Finley. There was a tribute to her the other day, and I talked about if my life were a museum and like all the things that would be in this museum. And in the early 90s, I saw Karen Finley's. Then it was an installation in Manchester, England, called "Written in the Sand." And basically it was like grieving all the people who had died of AIDS and cancer, and like I had never seen anything like it. And it was like a big sandbox, and then there was like a chair right in the middle of the room with these dried flowers, and you could write the names of people who died in the sand, and then you would just cover it over. And there were candles, and it was all candle lit, and so there were just all these shadows and everything. And I said, you know, maybe so that would be in my museum, in my life's museum. And then and I was thinking, well, maybe that museum or that installation was in my mind when I wrote Funeral Diva, right? So maybe that was also something that gave me language, you know. But I have to say, and this was something I had said to Amanda, who interviewed me, like, you know, a lot of people, I mean, we went through the AIDS crisis. I mean, I was very, very, you know, through the first part of it, we're still in it, right? But basically, I had like lost like so many of my friends. And I mean, I was a really young person, and like, you know, we all came to New York and we're trying to make ourselves and wanted to be poets and artists. And like, literally, you know, like I always think about Ginsberg's Howl. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed. And like, that's exactly what happened. I mean, people just, you know, like literally we found our voices and then everybody was like gone, you know. And Funeral Diva, the title comes from, I mean, it's kind of wry, but it is this idea of like being a funeral diva. I just went to funerals, you know, one after another after another. But also like the first thing in the church and the first thing in my museum would be my grandfather's church. And basically I mean, that's like where I learned poetry. I mean, it was from like all the testimonies, it was from the preachers and all the things like, Black Pentecostal preachers did, Black Baptist preachers. I mean, it was like wild, right? And so like that's where I learned poetry, right? And I mean, that's starting to come out now too, because like, like in school, they try to say, oh, it's Shakespeare and all the, no, poetry comes from us, it comes from our lives. It comes from, the lives that we live. It comes from all of those things. And so basically, I mean, I really found like my voice. And I think I found compassion, like, early on, it was always about like people needing things and, people, being addicts or people's house burnt down or just something. And it was like the church was really like their refuge. And so I don't know how authentic everyone was, but I did learn there, I think, to care for people, right? So I think probably that those things, like my grandfather's church, like really kind of like shaped, who I would become. Yeah. Yeah, and I think like so that sense, but I was also going to say that I never, some people moved on from like the AIDS crisis, like I never moved on, like I was devastated, like most of my friends were Black gay men or Latinx gay men, and I just couldn't. Um, I had to write about that. I had to talk about that, and it was like, I mean, there was a period of silence, right? And like no one, like, I think afterwards, and there was a writer, I can't remember who it was, but they said after the Holocaust, like the writers wouldn't write. And I really feel like that happened like after that first leg of like the AIDS crisis. I feel like people didn't speak, for 10, 15 years. And like right now, we're sort of like in a recovery period where, the stories are starting to come out, and like the books. But I remember saying to like, a publisher, it's like HIV AIDS, we have to talk about it, and they were like looking at me like, let me,
So, Pamela, one of the friends that you talk about and memorialize in your book is Donald Woods, who was a documentary filmmaker and somebody who died quite young. And I don't know that we have time for you to share his full poem, but I'm wondering if you might be able to tell us a little bit about his work and why it was so important to the community as well as to you, and to maybe read a stanza or two from his piece.
well, it's over there, so I'd have to go get it. but no, I don't know. I'll get it. But Donald, I don't know. It's hard to like separate out. He was a poet. He's in Marlon Riggs' Tongues Untied. And anybody, yeah. I mean, he's like a really gorgeous creature. Well, that was the first thing. So he was like a poet. He studied with Audre Lorde. And like, other countries, they were like this Black gay male writing troupe, kind of like the first of its kind, but I think there was like Blackheart in Philadelphia. But anyway, so okay, so there was Donald in other countries, and I remember like, hearing about them, and I went to this bookstore, and I like saw Donald, and I was like, oh my God, that man is beautiful. You know what I mean? He was gorgeous. And like they read this poetry and everything, and it was so revolutionary. And I remember I was like looking for a place to live. And I said to Donald, I was like, hey, do you know any place that I could live? And he was like, oh, you can come sleep on my couch. My sister's there, but don't worry about it. And I was like, I had just met this man, you know what I mean? And like that began our friendship, and that's kind of like what that era was like, So that was really it. And we both came out of the church. He was much more conservative than I was, but he was very close to his family. And he just, I mean, he was a beautiful poet, a beautiful spirit. And so he wrote all these things. And wait, so the beginning of this poem is Prescription, which is his famous poem. And one of the things that I've been doing in visual art is I've started to render all of these men in watercolor. And so my commitment is like a lot of them, they don't exist on paper, and then they don't exist like in the museums. So I'm trying to like, counter this erasure. So no point in crying injustice, shooting off in public places. They are slack-handed and wet-eyed with sympathy. Can confession aid the process, the fellowship of mourners, propping themselves up on heart-rendering commiserations, brave corners bending, blank eyes staring? Time waits for no man. It comes for you alone. You spit, yank your flaccid member, cry envious tears for young folks caressing at your side.
Thank you for sharing his work with us. Changing subjects a bit, it was really great to hear you talk about the way in which you read and view different works of film. You read this line from your poem, "All films are erased films," which was a really, really great comment. So, you know, like a lot of your poems engage with popular film, ranging from King Kong and Planet of the Apes to Black Panther. And, you know, you've talked a bit about your work too, about a shift in Hollywood film endings after 9/11. I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about the influence of film in your work and, you know, the ways in which you engage with it in your writing and thinking.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think film is beautiful. I think it's poetic, good film. And it just what? So I don't know, I consume it, and then I guess I would consider myself to be a cultural critic, so I love to like look at things, and I love to kind of take them apart and see how they work or they don't work. I find that I'm like pretty nerdy. I'm teaching a film class like right now on cultural criticism, and like, it's a bunch of geeks, and we just sit there and like, we look at everything and we're like, oh, and what about race? And what about gender? And what about, and yeah, and I also think like women of color and I think lesbians have like been kept out of cultural criticism. I mean, we had like, bell hooks, and I just actually, the convocation that I did at Yale was on bell hooks because she taught there. And it was really funny because I knew Bell, and I didn't like her. Like it wasn't like I didn't like her, like I respected her, but I was like, oh, like I always felt like she was a little extra, right? So I was like, okay, Bell, all right, great, and and so, and then it was really weird because I was looking for text to kind of support like all this, like all these theories that I had about film and cultural criticism. And like the only text I could really find was Bell, right? And I started reading all this Bell stuff and I was like, oh my God, she's amazing. She's amazing. And I was like, was I sleeping on Bell? I mean, I remember fighting with her, like, arguing. And I love to like, fight with like Black women critics. That's like my thing, like, yes, but so basically what was I was like, oh my God, she's a genius. And then I was hanging out with a friend of hers, and I was like, the next time I see Belle, I'm gonna apologize to her. And then that's when I found out she was dying. So it was really like, oh my God. And it happened really quickly. And so actually like the convocation at Yale was like my opportunity to talk about like her work and what she meant to me, and how I kind of like I miss some things, and I was like, oh my God, like what a genius.
Would you be willing to talk a little bit about the cult of celebrity that you see in film in Hollywood? You've also written about how celebrities from Beyonce to Jerry Seinfeld to Donald Trump have used race as a strategy of marketing and business. Would love to hear you say a few words on that.
Well, I mean, it's all about like pushing sort of like cultural hot buttons, right? So they have publicists that help them think about this. So it's like, it's not, I mean, again, like when Trump was running, like all of them except for Melania dyed their hair platinum blonde, right? And they were doing like these like kind of like, Hitler-esque, like, so it's like, I mean, it's clear strategy, right? So they're running on a white supremacist platform. That was the audience that they were going for. And like, they dressed the part, they did all that stuff, they learned all the signals. So it's not accidental. And then you have like Madonna, like right before she was ready to sell an album, she went on to Twitter and she said, oh, my nigger, and she was like talking about her son, right? And then she erased it, and then like the next day her album dropped. So they all do it, you know what I mean? So it's basically yeah, it's strategy. It's like it's publicity, how you get people. So you push people's buttons, you shock them, And then, you know, like, what was it? Like John Mayer, who I really don't like. And he was saying he had a white supremacist dick, you know, so they do this whole like race and like thing. Yeah. So it's like, it's a strategy, you know, that's what they do, you know, and then it's just sort of like even like with Beyonce and everybody's like, oh, she's such a feminist. And she was sampling like Ike's brutal beating of Tina. She was saying like, eat the cake, you know, eat the cake, anime. You know, that's what he was saying to her. I was like, okay, all right, yeah, whoa, big feminist there. I mean, she's like selling, you know, she's selling albums. And so, you know, basically, I mean, I remember speaking on a Beyonce panel at Pratt, and like all the women were all these like young women of color who were getting ready to graduate. And I was the only, I did all this research, and I don't hate her, but I was just kind of like, okay, you know, show me the money, you know, bring the argument. Let's debate, you know. And they were like, Pamela, and it was all like Beyonce worship. And I was really distressed about that, because I was like, okay, here are all these like young women of color that are getting ready to graduate, and like they don't have any sense of being able to like look at like any kind of critical thinking around Beyonce, and like what's marketing and like what's not, you know, like, you know, this idea of like this intimacy that we have and calling them by their first name, and we're all involved in their, you know, her and Jay-Z, and like, I mean, it's like, it's a contemporary soap opera, right? And this is the way that, again, they pull us in. And it's like, you don't know her. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? She's going to the bank, honey. That's the only thing you know, you know?
So I'd like to take a minute to turn to the audience for any questions, and we have people watching at home who are live streaming. So Stesha will share those questions with us. But real quick, I did want to ask you the last poem that you read, since we weren't able to capture all of it to the audience at home. What was the name of that poem? The last one that you read?
Oh, A Tale of Two Pandemics.
Tale of Two Pandemics. Great. All right. So do we have any questions from the live audience here with us? Yes. You can shout it out and I'll.
Hey. Mine too.
So the question is around the experience, your experiences of being perhaps this perspective of both being a poet, but also the person who's being poeticized, or that member of the community, or maybe another way to look at it might be the anthropologist versus the subject of what's anthropologized. So just wondering a little bit about that sort of duality of perspective, or that ability to sort of look at a distance, but also to be engaged in that perspective of the lived experience.
Well, a lot of times, yeah. I mean, you have to survive it before you can actually kind of write about it, you know. And I mean, it's interesting because like there's like some medical stuff that I went through, and I'm like picking up like again and like trying to deal with it now, because I got really discouraged like years ago. But I was thinking, I was like, you know what, you're gonna have to write about this. Like you're gonna have to write about this because that might be the only way that you will get like, you know, I don't know, one, to inform other people, but also to get some of the help that you need. And it was just kind of like, ooh, you know, like I don't want to have to write, you know, like I mean, I think, you know, Audre Lorde is always operative, you know, for me, in the sense of like breaking silence, like what are your silences, you know? And so, you know, constantly, you know, I'll break a few silences and then I'm on to the next one, or then I'm on to the next one, you know. So it's like becoming aware, the more and more that I dig, the more and more that I live of like what I'm silent about and what I need to, you know, speak truth to power. And like, you know, and like her thing is like, you know, leave no stone unturned, you know what I mean? And so I feel like even sometimes when I don't want to go there, like I feel like it's my job to have to go there. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, I think it's both, you know. I mean, it gets less so like in terms of writing, but then I don't know, sometimes I mean, I've worked through a lot of fear because I had a lot of stage fright, you know, like early on. And I've been able to like keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And like I get better and better. But like, I don't know, sometimes it comes back or it's just it's strange. But like, you know, like some of the greats are like, well, you know, when that fear goes away, you know, that's when you're really in trouble. You know what I mean? So it's not like, I mean, if you don't have a lot of fear, then that's great, you know, but I mean, basically you're learning how to use it. You just have to use it. You got to work it through, you know. You know, there's that thing, that meme that goes around on the internet, you know, what does it speak? Even if your voice shakes, you know what I'm saying? You gotta do it. You gotta do what you have to do, you know. Yeah, you have to break those silences. And that, I mean, it frees you and it also frees other people, you know. So that's what I was thinking about, like Karen's work. Like, you know, we're all these kind of like contemporary Tubmans, you know what I mean? This is how we, you know, this is how we free ourselves. This is how we free others, you know. I think the power of the story, the power of poetry is underrated because it has such a power and importance in our society.
So we're just going to check in with our online audience to see if there are any questions coming through the chat.
There are not questions, but we have a couple comments that I wanted to share. We have from Mary Ellen. We have a comment from a little bit earlier when you were reading saying, wow, what strong poems. So I wanted to share that. And then from a wonderful local artist and writer, Stormy Weber.
Stormy!
Yeah.
Oh my God, no way. Stormy!
Yeah. So Stormy says, thank you, Pamela, for honoring these brave, beautiful ancestors. Brilliant work.
Thank
So-
you, Stormy.
Wanted to share
We
this.
go back a long way.
Well, I have a couple more questions to sort of close out our time together. These are of a kind of lighter variety. I know in your reading today, you didn't have an opportunity to read too many poems about travel, but travel has been a big part of your experience. In Funeral Diva, you write about traveling to Jamaica, Ghana, and Portugal. And those travels have seemed deeply important to connecting to aspects of your identity and ancestry as a Black adoptee. I'm wondering if you can just talk about what are some of the insights that travel, whether national or international, have given to you?
Well, I think like probably reshapes who I am. Um, I don't see myself just as like I don't know, like a local person or whatever. I see myself as like part of a diaspora, you know. So yeah, I don't see myself just primarily as like an American Black. I see myself belonging to a spectrum, belonging to people like across the globe. That really changed for me like when I was in London, I think in like the 90s, like I could no longer just have my identity be like a Black lesbian below 14th Street. You know what I mean? Like it was like I identified with the world, you know what I mean? And not just around race, you know, it was like, but to see myself as an international citizen, as an international artist, you know what I mean? And belonging. And then like in South Africa, and I've written about this, but I never thought that I would have an opportunity to sit down with people who were like jailed during the apartheid era, like, you know, poets or like, you know, women who like, you know, took up arms and, you know, gave up like their livelihoods, like left the university, you know, that we would all be sitting down together at a table talking, you know. And that was really meaningful for me because I was reared on anti-apartheid politics, you know, but I never thought I would be one of those people. Like I wouldn't, you know, that I was going to be like a freedom fighter and I was going to get to sit with all these freedom fighters and we were going to strategize.
So last question for you. I'm curious about what you're working on next. You mentioned briefly earlier that you're working on a special commission for the AIDS Memorial Project in New York, and would love to hear about your upcoming projects and what we can look out for.
Yeah, there's that. I'm finishing a new book. It's called 929. And it's the amount of time that Derek Chauvin sat on George Floyd's neck, right? Originally it was 46. Right? So and so it's kind of like George Floyd uprising meets my father's death meets the pandemic, right? So all of those things. And I thought I finished it, but I didn't, you know, and so now I'm like back at it. But I mean, I think it's almost done. And then so I'm hoping to follow up with 929. I think it's a beautiful book. And then somebody has contacted me and wants to republish my first book, Imagine Being More Afraid of Freedom Than Slavery. So I think that may come out next year if they're still interested. Yeah. So yeah, so I have like a couple of books. I have a visual show at the Ford Foundation, and it's a group show, and basically it's called Tactics of Care and Mourning. And I have like the people from TOPS, who were murdered by that white supremacist. So again, I felt like, they went into the supermarket and like killed all those Black people. And so again, I'm like trying to, give visibility to people that you wouldn't necessarily see in the art world, right? So it's like I want them to come to the show, and I want them to see those people from TOPS, and I want them to see all my brothers and like all my sisters and who I came up with. I mean, I'm an only child, but I came up with like a really huge community of artists, and I want people to know them.
Thank you so much for coming to Seattle and sharing your work with us, Pamela. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. You guys rock. Woo! Seattle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Shin Yu. Thank you to everybody watching both online and here in person. As I mentioned at the top, our friends over at Elliott Bay have copies of Funeral Diva over to at the table to your right. And I've popped some links in the chat for folks watching online. And of course, the library carries Pamela's books as well. So you can always check them out online because we're currently closed, but do it online, and then you can get it transferred to your branch. As you're heading out, you'll need to leave through the 4th Avenue entrance, which is probably where you came in, so that shouldn't be a problem, but you can drop surveys off at the table right over here as you're heading out. And for folks watching online, I dropped a link in the chat, and would appreciate it if you took a minute after the event to fill out the chat or the survey. And as I mentioned, you can find Pamela's books at the library, spl.org. We're so grateful to everybody who made tonight's program possible. Let's give another round of applause to all the wonderful partners, the AMP AIDS Memorial Pathway, Seattle LGBTQ+ Center, formerly Gay City, POCAN, People of Color Against AIDS Network, the Lavender Rights Project, and Elliott Bay Book Company. And of course, thanks to our sponsors, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, the Seattle Times, and the Seattle Public Library Foundation. And of course, thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.